All right, big good one here, and eventually we will like, subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. So, I'm doing a review on New Mutants, and I gotta say, New Mutants first of all. The log line of it is five mutants just discovering their abilities while held in a secret facility. Against their will, they fight to escape their past sins and save themselves. And the director and writer on this one is Josh Boone. It stars Blue Hunt, Maisie Williams, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, basically Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, and Anya Taylor-Joy, Charlie Heaton, and I didn't get the rest of the cast name, I didn't catch it, but it's got a pretty solid cast. But Anya Taylor-Joy kind of steals the show. But before we get into this, I'll talk a little bit about the history. So this film's been trying to come out since 2017. I've been looking for this film for years. Delay after delay, reshoots, Disney, Marvel, Fox acquisition. I started to think it would never see the light of day. It couldn't come out on VOD due to some kind of contractual agreement. And ironically, every other film is now suffering the same fate, pardon the pun, in a weird sense of karma, which is a vitally important New Mutants character absent from this film. Wonder Woman, 1984, Tenet, and so many more, they've been delayed. And New Mutants has manifested itself to reality and made these other films realize their worst fears. And if you see the movie, you'll realize kind of the irony and what I'm talking about there. So, before we get into the review, I want to kind of talk about the experience of going to the theaters. Because underneath this pandemic, it's really different and kind of strange. You got to wear your mask. They got hand sanitizer and stuff everywhere. And they also kind of set you seats apart. However, in my theater on the way there, first of all, the GPS lied to us and made us go a little bit past it. I went with my fiance. It tried to tell us the theater was in the middle of the road past the actual theater. And then we get there, my fiance thinks it's really creepy because the parking lot's deserted. She questions if the place is even open. I mean, the place is all lit up and stuff. Of course it's open. So we go inside. There's only like 3 employees. The place is empty. On the way to walking inside, it was awesome. It was like a zombie apocalypse. It's just deserted. Deserted. Perfect for going to a movie like this, which is supposed to be kind of horror-esque. And there was only one other older couple in our theater, so there were only a total of 4 people in that entire theater. It was pretty cool. Just me, my fiance, some other couple. We were pretty far apart, and it felt to me like we practically rented the theater out for ourselves. It was quite the incredible experience, and I really enjoy going to the theater in the middle of a pandemic. So, with that said, the way I do my reviews, up front, I give you Act 1, the best stuff up front, to kind of hook the audience, as any screenwriter or entertainer should give you the best stuff up front, and then I'll go into Act 2, my personal bias, things that may not affect your view of the film, because you may not be familiar with New Mutants at all, and you may just be like an average moviegoer. And then I'll get into Act 3, the worst stuff about the film. So, the best stuff up front, really casting choices for Wolfbane and Ileana / Magic. Those were incredible choices. Really incredible. There's some, there's a kind of fun teenage kind of hazing thing that goes on here as they're all locked up in this facility together, there to discover their powers and learn how to control them. But there's really entertaining dynamic between the individuals. Like I said, some kind of hazing and this antagonistic rivalry. I do want to point out that they have Buffy on DVD. You can see it several times, and they watch it several times. So the characters connecting and bonding. There are a few organic jokes that work. Interesting. Lockett puppet, which I wondered for the majority of the film if it was just going to be more than a puppet, if it was going to become real. And spoiler warning, he does become real, which is absolutely amazing to see him in action, to see the little creature in action. It's just was one of the best parts of the film for me. Yeah, I would say it's the absolute best part, but there's actually something I like a little bit more in there. So, um, Ileana really steals the show with her bratty in your face behavior and action oriented behavior. That just that the action scenes with her, they're pretty damn solid. But my favorite scene of the whole movie is when Wolfbane, Maisie Williams, when she wolfs out, that mid transformation look, the eyes, and she just shreds. I'm not gonna say who, but in this bloody scene, it was pretty awesome. I wish there was more of that in the film from her particular character. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we're gonna get more of these characters. But moving on from that, each character is pretty intriguing in their own right. Unfortunately, we don't get to know as much of them as we should have. They have tragic backstories and solid portrayals, but the particularly the male characters, we don't really get a lot out of in terms of unveiling their story. And it does feel like the film should have been longer to really flesh out more of this stuff for us. The runtime is only like an hour and 30 minutes, if I remember correctly, but I feel like this film should have been fleshed out more, stretched out a little bit more, so we could really get more out of the male characters, out of Cannonball and Sunspot, and maybe a bit more out of Anna Taylor-Joy's background, her sort of where she goes when she, that type of stuff. I don't want to say too much, but let's kind of move into my personal bias to Act 2. Sunspot and Cecilia. Now, this won't affect your view of the film, but Sunspot and Cecilia Reyes are portrayed by fair-skinned individuals, and it's kind of like race change. And I'm not particularly fond of that type of stuff. I didn't like it when Batman did it with Bane in the Batman films. I don't like it when Marvel does it in every other film to some, B character. I don't like race changing in comic book movies. When I'm familiar with the characters, if I'm not familiar with the characters and I go in not knowing, it won't affect my perception. But if I learned that there was a race change character, it doesn't, because you need to stay true to the spirit of the characters. That means their iconic looks, because you're going to make departures with the story. So race changing, not on board with. Magic Ileana, she acts different than from what I'm familiar with in the source material. I mean, in here, she's a powerhouse in the film, and she looks accurate, but her behavior, maybe this is how she is more commonly in today's stuff. I'm not really sure, but it's just, it didn't feel like an accurate depiction of her with the attitude she displayed. And Cannonball, they really did not convey his power set very well on screen. They did not. And as far as his look goes, I didn't feel that they did a good job with accurately depicting him either. And here's a big one that's probably going to be pretty controversial, probably as controversial as the race change I talked about. Danny Wolfbane, and this is a spoiler thing, but not really, because they have kind of hyped it up in promotional talk. Danny and Wolfbane have this kind of lesbian relationship that was off-putting for my fiance. And these characters, I don't know what they're doing in the comics with them today, but I don't remember these characters being gay, and I don't see Uh, from what I remember of the characters, I don't see why we had to go there, but maybe this is more of a modern day depiction. And a funny side note, as much as Disney likes to, you know, brag about they're all on board with LGBT stuff, they haven't really done much in the way of that. And now, uh, their first kind of act, because now that they own this stuff, they own, New Mutants, they own Fox. Now they can kind of brag that, oh, see, they do follow through with the stuff they talk about, even though it wasn't really them. So moving on from that, let's just jump into Act 3, where I talk about the kind of worst stuff in this particular film. Uh, the characters are representations of cliche stereotypes, which is often used in horror movies. However, the biggest letdown though is that this movie rides the fence between horror, Breakfast Club, and superhero film. It doesn't commit to one. That would ultimately like make it a stronger film if we're doing so. Had it committed to horror fully, you would have had a really unique superhero film unlike any other. And though this is really unlike most others, uh, it could have just been so much more. It had creepy visuals, tones, vibes, but the execution thwarts it from achieving true horror status. It is very much like Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it's Nightmare on Elm Street 3, some Dream Warriors, where they're kind of trapped in this mental institution and they have to fight Freddy through the dreams. If I remember correctly, that's the one. But it has all the elements and ingredients to be true horror, but it just doesn't fully commit. So the movie, it doesn't do a good job of characters questioning like their residency, or really explaining how Ileana, particularly, isn't capable of just leaving, teleporting through barriers, watching her get manhandled by Cecilia and tossed in solitude. That required explanation for me of why such a powerful character would just accept defeat when the entire film we see how feisty and rebellious she is. And the whole thing about where they're at, it's Cecilia, her character, keeping them there with these barriers. She's the one that kind of keeps them isolated because their powers are dangerous and all that. And I won't spoil things for you too much. I just kind of want to brush on things that didn't work. So here's a big one though, and spoiler warning. This isn't necessarily a spoiler, but the film does not have a strong, compelling enemy when it comes down to it. A villain. I mean, Mr. Sinister is certainly alluded to, and it would have been a great one in this horror setting. It would have been a great villain in this horror setting to have show up on the scene. However, there is an argument to be made, and spoiler warning, kind of, this is me alluding to something big, but the movie just kind of spells it out for you, where it's not as much as a mystery and intrigue as the trailers would lead you to believe. It's just really flat out in your face in the movie the whole time. So, there's an argument to be made that being your own worst enemy is so much more compelling, and honestly, it could have been had the execution of it not got so sloppy in the third act. So ultimately, the climax of this film, it sucks. It's underwhelming, a real letdown, but a lot of the stuff leading up to it works really well. Act 3 is kind of a big, messy CGI fest. And we never see the true potential of characters like Cannonball, Sunspot, and we barely get that of Wolfbane. And honestly, I would have liked to see much more of Magic when she sort of transports into that otherworldly place. that she refers to as purgatory. I would have that would so much getting more of that in this. It would have really made for such a great, you know, thing. If we're committing to horror, which we should have done, fully committed. And I ultimately, this isn't the best film. I kind of feel like there's something missing. There's scenes missing, or something that this isn't what we should have got. I mean, this film's been delayed so long that they could have rearranged it and done all kinds of things, really beefed it up. And I thought they were going to beef it up. They did say that they beefed up the special effects, gave it more finishing touches and all that, and it still doesn't look the greatest, mind you, the special effects when it comes to that type of stuff. But there are some really interesting, creepy creatures in here and all that that make up for it. And one thing I gotta say, I am not really particularly fond of what they did with Wolfbane, her kind of fears and her faith. They did a lot of weird things with those characters that kind of felt like they were trying to poke a beehive. Now, I'm not a religious person. Actually, I'm an atheist, but it does feel like somewhat of what they were doing was potentially insulting to those who have a very strong faith and who are very religious. So if you are very religious, like, just fair warning, there might be some stuff in here that bothers you. Um, with that said, though, that's all I'm really going to say on this. I really like some of the creatures, some of the visuals. The acting was very solid, but these characters weren't fleshed out enough. This story did not go down a strong enough horror path, and it wasn't long enough to really do that. So I'd give it, I like it, but it really is just average. I like it, and but it's an average film. So I guess I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. No, I'll do that much. I should be giving it like a 5 out of 10, but I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Anyways, comment down below. Let me know what you thought of it, or if you haven't even seen it yet. Hopefully you didn't watch this review, because, like I said, when I went down to the theater, there was only one other couple, so this film being released now, it's not going to help this film at all. This film is going to suffer greatly being released in this pandemic, and that's one thing I should have mentioned up front when I talked about the theoretical experience. This pandemic's really going to hurt this film. This film probably would perform way better under normal circumstances, but underneath the pandemic, no, this film is going to suffer. But it's finally out there. It finally happened. It finally happened after years. And I don't regret going to see it. I don't. Because I wanted to see this for years. So 6 out of 10. Big good one here. Eventually we will like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know your favorite, least favorite moments. Let's have a conversation about some of the depictions of characters and stuff. What didn't set well with you? What did set well with you? What you wish they would have done better? What you think they should have done differently? What you think they did right? Really interesting film to have a conversation about, despite its flaws and failures and its strengths. So, stay awesome. Rock on.